The little girl wasn't staring at him. She was staring at his plate, at the golden stack of pancakes dripping in syrup, at the eggs still steaming, at the strips of bacon she had probably only seen in pictures. And when he noticed her eyes, wide, silent, aching, something inside him shifted in a way he couldn't ignore. Before we go further, take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Ripple of Kindness if you believe small acts can change lives and that everyone deserves a second chance. Stories like this remind us that kindness still exists in the quietest corners of ordinary days. It was a small-town diner, the kind with faded turquoise booths and windows that let in pale morning light. He had come there alone, as he often did on Saturdays, dressed in a crisp charcoal blazer that made him look slightly out of place among the regulars in worn flannel and denim. His life was built on discipline and distance, early meetings, calculated decisions, numbers that grew larger by the month. He liked things predictable, clean, contained. Across the aisle stood a young woman, barely in her late 20s, her brown hair tied up in a hurried bun, a denim jacket thrown over a simple beige dress. She looked exhausted in the way only someone carrying too much for too long can look. At her side stood a little girl, no more than 4 years old, with soft curls and a pink sweater slightly too thin for the season. The girl's shoes were scuffed, her cheeks pale, her fingers curled tightly around the hem of her mother's dress. They hadn't ordered anything. The waitress had given them a polite smile that carried the weight of understanding. The woman had asked for a glass of water, just water. She had chosen a booth near the exit, as if planning her escape before anyone could notice. But children don't know how to hide hunger. The little girl's gaze drifted again and again to his table, to the food, to the simple luxury of a full breakfast. She wasn't whining. She wasn't asking. She was simply looking, her eyes lingering a fraction too long, then darting away when she realized she might be caught. He saw it all. He tried to look down at his phone to return to the safety of emails and headlines, but the image wouldn't leave him. Her eyes, that quiet longing. He had grown up poor himself, though no one looking at him now would ever guess. He remembered the way hunger didn't just live in the stomach, it lived in the mind. It made you small. It made you invisible. The young woman stood suddenly, gently taking her daughter's hand. There was a stiffness to her movements, the kind that comes from pride fighting desperation. She placed a few crumpled bills on the table for the water. She didn't look around. She didn't want pity. She just wanted to leave quietly before the little girl's stare betrayed them both. But he had already pushed his chair back. He wasn't sure what moved him first, memory, guilt, or something softer he hadn't felt in years. He walked toward them, heart beating harder than it ever did in boardrooms filled with powerful people. The woman froze when she saw him approach. Her body tensed, protective, defensive. He didn't smile in a way that suggested charity. He didn't look at her like she was a problem to solve. Instead, he crouched slightly so he was eye level with the little girl. He told her he had ordered too much food and hated wasting it. He said he'd be grateful if someone could help him finish it. He made it sound like she was doing him a favor. The mother's eyes filled instantly, but she tried to refuse. Pride again. Dignity again, he understood. So he shifted his tone, gentle but firm, and told her that once someone had done the same for him. He said it wasn't about need. It was about sharing. There was a long pause that felt like a held breath. Finally, she nodded. They returned to his booth together. The little girl climbed onto the seat, her eyes still uncertain, as if afraid the food might disappear. When he slid the plate toward her, she didn't grab it. She looked at her mother first. Only when she saw permission did she take a small bite. He had never seen someone eat so carefully, so gratefully. The woman explained slowly that she had lost her job 2 months earlier when the small retail store closed without warning. Rent had swallowed her savings. Childcare options were scarce. Interviews came and went, each one promising hope and delivering silence. She had been stretching every dollar, skipping meals so her daughter wouldn't have to. That morning, she had told her little girl they were just going out for an adventure to distract her from the emptiness in their fridge. He listened without interrupting. He wasn't used to listening without calculating outcomes. But this wasn't a negotiation. It was a life unraveling in front of him. When the little girl finished her pancakes, syrup sticky on her fingers and a faint smile finally breaking across her face, he made a decision that surprised even him. He asked the woman about her skills, her experience. She had managed inventory, handled customer service, balanced registers. She spoke with quiet competence, as if embarrassed to admit she was capable. He owned several businesses in the city nearby. Warehouses, offices, teams always looking for reliable managers who understood responsibility the hard way. He didn't make a grand speech. He didn't promise miracles. He simply offered her an interview on Monday, a real one, not the kind that disappears into a void. He gave her his card, the weight of it heavier than paper. She stared at it as if it were fragile glass. Over the next weeks, things shifted. The interview became a job. The job became stability. It wasn't charity. She worked fiercely, determined to prove she deserved the chance. She arrived early. She stayed late. She learned quickly. Within months, she was supervising a small team, her confidence slowly returning like sunlight after a long storm. He found himself visiting that branch more often than necessary. Not for her, he told himself, but to check on operations. Yet every time he saw her laughing softly while reviewing reports, or watched her little girl waiting in the lobby after daycare with brighter eyes and warmer clothes, he felt something loosen inside his chest. He had built an empire thinking success meant isolation. That strength meant never needing anyone. But in that diner, when he saw a child staring at his plate, he had been reminded that strength can also mean stepping towards someone instead of away. Years later, the little girl would barely remember the hunger. She would remember pancakes. She would remember a man who knelt down and made her feel like she mattered. And her mother would remember the morning she tried to leave quietly, ashamed of what she couldn't provide, only to find that being seen was the very thing that saved her. Before this story ends, I want to ask you something special. If this moment touched you even a little, please comment the word kindness below. Let's fill the comments with a reminder that compassion still lives among us. Because sometimes the world doesn't change with loud gestures or grand speeches. Sometimes it changes when one person notices a child staring at a plate and decides that walking past is no longer an option. And if this story moved your heart,